Hello guys, today we're going to be out here looking at trees. Yes, trees. You see, I in my previous video made a comment about looking for things or like different video ideas that maybe you guys might want to suggest. And I mentioned to myself maybe we could do a video about common moth host plants. Well, that sounds like a pretty good idea to me. So today we're going to go over many different trees. I'm going to try to cram in as many species as I physically can into this video to show you what plants you can use and what moths you can use them for. So stay tuned. First tree up here is one of my absolute favorites. It's also one of the most common host plants for a species of moth, such as, you know, Actius, besides the pine feeders, a lot of African species, many different of our native species like Imperials, Heliaphora, Promethea, stuff like that. And that is Sweetgum. So when it comes to Sweetgum, this is what you're going to be looking for. You're going to be looking for a leaf like this, sizably, pretty big, and it's going to be palmately lobed. They're going to be simple leaves, so not compound. But a lot of times you see with the younger leaves, they have 5 prongs. And then with these bigger leaves, they have 6th and 7th that come off the ends here. And this is autumn, so some of the leaves are turning yellow, but that's okay because I can still show you the plants and you'll know what they are. For example, here, this is one of the ones I'll talk about later. It's just a leaf I found. This is one of the ones I'll talk about later. As you can see, this one seems to be doubly serrate, or just like more serrate than this one is. So do not confuse these with the ones that I just showed, especially since these guys are bigger. Now, their seed pods are also very distinctive. Now, I can go show you another Sweetgum that has some seed pods on it so that we can show you what they look like. So these pods are old, of the Sweetgum. When they first come out, they're green and they don't have any holes in them. But this is the seed pod of a Sweetgum tree. This is what you're going to be looking for. Another Sweetgum tree here. The trees like wet areas. We are actually right next to a retention pond over there. And it gets pretty wet in this area, so these trees are definitely going to like that. But they just happen to be very nutritious for caterpillar species, so you're definitely going to want to know Sweetgum. If you don't know any other tree, you're going to want to know Sweetgum. All right, next. Next up here, we're going to do some more obscure trees that only really have a few hosts, like caterpillar hosts, but are still useful nonetheless. And our first one is Sassafras. Now, Sassafras is unmistakable. It is physically unmistakable. You will notice this when you see it. They have 3 types of leaves. I like to call the sock on the hand, the dinosaur foot, and the mitten. Now, just showing you that these guys are pretty common. I noticed them a bunch. There's some here. There's a big one right there. There's just a lot of these guys. Now, these guys have a few hosts, actually. They can have Cecropia moths, right? Spicebush swallowtails. And the other host for Spicebush swallowtails is actually Spicebush. Keep that in mind. They only have 2. So, Spicebush swallowtail, Cecropia moths, Promethea moths. I've actually found Promethea moth cocoons and caterpillars on these trees. I've heard Io moths, and I've also heard imperial moths. I actually have found an imperial moth on a sassafras. It's one of my earlier videos. So they have a few hosts, which I find pretty cool. Some hosts that you might like, but that's about where the hosts stop. But that was sassafras. We're gonna move on to our next one. All right, next up, this is a white mulberry. Now, you can tell it's a mulberry. First of all, they have berries in here. They do have, like, blackberries and stuff like that. I don't know if it's specifically blackberries, but they do have a lot of berries. The leaves are serrate, like this. I can give you one. It's pretty obvious that they are serrate, but they're also not very sharp, kind of rounded in a sense. And then they actually also have a very variable lobing, such as this. This weird junk over here. So those are definitely going to be what you're going to want to look out for. Now these guys don't have many hosts. The one that I actually stopped to show this tree for was Bomboxy mori, that like silk moth. Now that's the only really major species that you're going to want to look for these for, but it's still an important one nonetheless for a species that commonly bred. Next up is another obscure tree, and this is going to be Catalpa. Catalpa is another one of those absolutely unmistakable trees. Look at how massive these leaves are and look at their shape. Now these guys, ooh, look at that spider. Now just like the Sweetgum, these also like wet areas, but they only have one really notable host, that being the Catalpa hornworm that you've seen on this channel before. And these guys' seed pods are also unmistakable. They're these really long, like pea pods in a sense. And they have like little seeds inside of the pod. This one, I don't see any on this one. So it might be too young for that, or they might have all just dropped and I just don't see any. But I know that over there, that Catalpa definitely has some. I'm just far too lazy to go over there to look. But these guys are unmistakable. They're just like, pick off this leaf. Like this, it's really easy to find. They actually have whorled leaves. Whorled meaning their leaves come out at 3 points. The same point, but on 3 sides. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's another way to tell it. But yeah, we can move on to our next one. Here, I can actually show you a seed pod. I found one. This is a Catalpa seed pod. Let's break it open. So that's how you know it's a Catalpa, but let's move on. Our next tree is Walnut. Now these guys lose their leaves quicker than most, so I can't really show much of it. But this is a walnut leaf. This is one leaf. This is a compound leaf made up of many leaflets. And walnuts also have these little balls on them. They're just scattered around. I can maybe find one for you. I know there's some up here. Hey, here's one. Walnuts drop these. Boop. So, walnuts are a very common tree. They feed on, the lunas feed on them, luna moths. We have a cecropia. I'm pretty sure I had some cecropia that I was running out of food for, so I just gave them some walnut and they did fine. I think maybe imperial moths or polyphemus, but I'm not too sure. You could definitely check on that, but definitely lunas. So this is another common tree that, you know, caterpillars have hosts for, but it's one of the more obscure ones that only really a few do. Next up, over there. Next up is Bradford Pear. Bradford Pear is a simple leaf. Looks like this. It's invasive here, but they have these little seed pods that birds really like to eat. And I've only noticed one host plant. Like, species actually uses this as their host. And I think it's the Phaeonius myops, so one of those hawk moths, because I've seen one of those hawk moths near this tree. And I know that one of their hosts is like that. So, definitely keep this one in mind. But it's not going to be used for, like, anything else. So don't use this as really anything else other than that. And next up on our list is winged sumac, or just sumac in general, but this is the winged variety. This is another compound leaf. This is all one leaf. All right. Now, obviously the leaves are green. This just happens to be red because it's autumn. You can also tell it's a winged sumac because of the leaves going up the side to the other leaves. It's kind of interesting. But the trees have these like red seed pod things Now, sumac in general is used for actually a lot of different species. I've seen saddleback caterpillars feed on those. Some flannel moths, tussocks, lunas, Actius rhodonuma. I'm pretty sure some other species like Argamametriae, maybe, I think. Rus actually has a lot of species that can eat off of it. Correct me on Argamametriae if that's incorrect, but I think. But other than that, Rus is more or less a it's an okay one. It has a few hosts. Oh yes, there's more. I've seen people feed the Argama mimosa on Rus and other things like that. There's also what else were there? Oof. What else? What other things have I seen them being feeding on? Just a lot of stuff, really. So sumac is definitely something you should keep in mind for future reference. Next up is our oaks. Now, oaks are very useful because they can be fed to really anything. You got Promethea, you got basically the entire genus of Antheraea. You have a ton of random, like, species. Like, there's oak. There's, like, the Anisota. Anisota also has a lot of oak, like, you know, hosts. And then you have a lot of different types of oaks. Like, here's one. I don't know specifically which one this is, but it's an oak. This is another oak. This is a willow oak. Yeah, this is an oak. It's a willow oak. Blunk. We have more oaks. Like here, this is another species of oak. We have more right there. That's another oak. This is actually a black oak right here. You can tell it's a black oak because of these little... Let me see if my camera will focus on them. They have these like little spines going off of the edges, kind of like little tendrils. You can tell that that's a black oak because of that. You have pin oaks, red oaks, white oaks, all the oaks. The oaks, oak, it's a oak, the oaks. There's just a ton of oaks, very useful plant. Look up what species can eat them, you know, keep that in mind. Next up is beech, not birch, beech. These leaves are very papery and thin. Underneath, they actually have a weird texture. It might just be because of this being a young tree, but they have a weird texture underneath. The bark of beeches are very smooth. Very smooth, like no hard, rigid areas, just like pure bark. And they could be fed to lunas, I know that. But these aren't really something else. Like, I know that Bart had fed Aurivillus auratus with these. So they definitely have a few species out there that can eat them, but I wouldn't suggest that one as like a major species. But let's move on. This next tree has actually, we've been surrounded by them. They've pretty much lost all their leaves, but it's the Tulip poplar. Let me just pull up a leaf off the ground. Now these guys have a fair bit of hosts. First of all, you have the Promethea moths, you have the Tulip poplar moths, which are basically the Colosamia angulifera, the tulip tree moth. You have a tiger swallowtails, another species that likes to feed on these. There's a lot of different species out there that can feed on the tulip poplar. They have a very smooth bark. They're just stand tall trees. They're shade intolerant. They do not like shade. So if you'll notice, these guys don't really start having branches until like up in the canopy up there. They just don't like shade. So you're going to notice them being their best, biggest, brightest when they have nothing around them. You can also tell them because of these like weird eye things coming out the side of them. They're just all on all these tulip poplars. I don't know what they are really. But I guess we can move on now. Next up we have our conifers. Now conifers are nice for one reason, because they do not lose their leaves in the winter for the most part. For example, cypress, deciduous, but most conifers are evergreen. Now this appears to be a cedar, but we're talking more specifically about pine. Pine has long needles and just like in bunches. So pines can be used to feed many different things. So we have like Citheronia, Ciprocralis. You have a bunch of pine-feeding Actias species like Dubernardi, Nidiferi, Felicis, Chapay, you know, a lot of stuff like that. There's the Eacles imperialis pinny that can also be fed on pine. There's just a lot. There's a pine hawk moth. There's a lot of species that can be fed on pine. I didn't even scratch the surface right there. So keep that in mind. You can use some you can use cedars, some you can use fir, but mostly just pine is what you're looking for. All right, next up on our list is hickory. This is another compound leaf. This is all one leaf. Now, this is actually what am I trying to say? Oh, this doesn't have very many hosts. Like, Luna is one of them, but like that's about it. That's all I can really think of off the top of my head. So I definitely wouldn't suggest using this for anything like other than Luna. But if you're going to want to use it for Luna, it's pretty common. What you should be wary of when you're looking for hickory is actually a common other tree that looks like hickory, but is not hickory. It actually fooled me when I first saw it, thinking that it was hickory when it's not. We can walk over to it. Hold on, I'll pause this. Next up is Spicebush. I have about 2 hosts that I actually know for Spicebush. One is Promethea moths. They've actually been nicknamed the Spicebush silk moth. And of course, Spicebush swallowtails. But besides that, Spicebush, oh yes, also Cecropias. Cecropias are definitely a host for this. But other than that, really, I don't think that there's anything else worth mentioning that it can actually feed off of Spicebush. And if you're like international, like if you're watching this from out of the USA, this you don't even need this on your list, because this just isn't going to be anything that you're going to want to look for. Your hickory lookalike is going to be this, Pawpaw. It's kind of looks like hickory, but it has simple leaves, so not compound, and they're bigger leaves. Now, Pawpaw actually does have a noteworthy host. It has one. That host being the, oh, what is it called? Yes, the zebra swallowtail. It's a very noteworthy host, but that's like the only host that it has, really. That's really all you're going to want to use it for. Next up is this tree, which has no leaves except a few, but it's a red maple, or just really any maple. This red maple specifically has opposite leaves, has opposite leaf arrangement, and has a red on the stems. But now maple can be used for specifically like Polyphemus moths, rosy maple moths. There's maple spanworms. That's a geometrid. But maple doesn't really have many plants that you can really call a host for. It's kind of interesting though. It's useful for some plants, like obviously rosy maple moths, one of the most famous freaking moths in existence. If you want to breed that, you're going to need maple. But besides that, it's there are other options. Not a necessity to have. Okay, so there's a few other species out there that I don't have that are pretty useful for breeding. One of them is Ligustrum, or privet, the same plant. But like there's a lot of different species that feed on that. But I don't use it very much because I don't even really have it. I think I have a bush of it in my backyard at my mom's house. I'm not at my mom's house right now. But I don't even know if it's really privet. Like, it looks like privet. I fed a species of Holocerina until like L4 when they died. But they, I think that's not the plant's fault, my fault. On privet, and I just don't think, I just don't feel confident enough to show you privet when I don't really think I have it. But that is one to know about privet. It's a lot of different species. Like, I've seen Io moths get fed on it. I've seen basically every single Rothschildia. There's a lot of Atticus, a lot of African moths that feed on it. But yeah, other than that, we've pretty much gone over everything. If the takeaway from this video is that if you're going to want to be a serious breeder, I'd suggest getting oak and sweetgum. Definitely privet as well. If you had those 3 plants, you could breed pretty much anything. Like, obviously not everything, but a good solid amount. But other than that, guys, see ya. Hope you enjoyed the plant identification.
Daddy?
Not now, son.
Dad?
Not now, son. Son.
Super Idol 的笑容都没你的甜，8月正午的阳光都没你耀眼。